Hi, I'm Talal Al Asmani, and thank you for joining us for this Mawaheb Chat. Today, we have an awesome lineup of guests here. Thank you very much for coming. We have Howard Owens, we have Ben Silverman, and Greg Daniels. And collectively, they have written, show-run, and executive produced shows like Ugly Betty, The Biggest Loser, The Office, The Simpsons, Parks and Rec, The Tudors, and many, many, many more. So with this amount of knowledge in one room, let's cut to the chase and start talking and learning from you. Thank you guys. I know you guys are busy here, and this is awesome for you guys to have this time.
Thank you to be here. Yeah.
Well, you guys have all done things on your own, but at the same time, you've also worked together. How did that happen?
Well, Ben hired us.
It's actually true, but no. But we, it's a collaborative medium. You can probably talk about some of those experiences as well in building your shows.
Yeah, it is a collaborative medium, and it takes a lot of people to do a television show, and someone has to start it off either writing a pilot or getting the rights or having the vision of the idea and putting it together. And Ben put the Office together, having seen just the very, very first glimpse of it in England and knowing its potential and jumping on it and getting the rights. And then I also really responded to the beginning of the English show and really wanted to work on it, and we ended up adapting it for America.
And then I remember Greg brought me the idea because I went to go run the network at NBC, and Greg came to me with an idea because we both loved Amy Poehler.
Yeah.
And Greg designed Parks and Recreation with her in mind from the very beginning.
Yeah. And so you talked about adapting The Office. Now, adapting shows is very popular in the region. It's actually getting more popular now. What are the difficulties and what's the process of adapting a show? Because you don't literally adapt every episode and translate it over. How does that happen?
Well, I mean, we've learned from trial and error, I would say, right? And I took a lot of, I learned a lot from watching the show Coupling that you did right before The Office.
Which I don't mention that much.
But that was also a British show. Good idea to adapt
pretty good.
it. But I remember talking to the writers who adapted that, and they didn't start writing original scripts until episode 8 or something like that. And the scripts that they used from the British show didn't really fit the cast. And we, on The Office, started writing wholly original scripts on episode 2 because, of the example of what we saw. And so to me, I think the key when adapting something that was made for another culture is first to completely understand why the choices were made for that culture, and then to go, all right, well, that is, that works here, this doesn't really work here, to pick through it, and then you have to go and substitute stuff that fits the same size.
The equivalent of that joke, or the equivalent of that cringy moment.
Right. Well, even broader than that, because it's a great point, it's also about how much control does the underlying partner exert. And Ricky Gervais and Steven loved Greg. The Simpsons and other shows that Greg had worked on actually informed their thinking when they had created their show. So when they met Greg, they said, please do what you think is best. Uncoupling, the writer Stephen Moffat, who was married to the producer Sue Virtue and whose mother-in-law was the producer, all arrived in tow to America to try and teach us how to make a show. And in turn, blew it by being way too controlling and exerting far too much influence on the process and not letting us, as the local partner, bring all the local knowledge. And so there's a great ebb and flow of getting what is the essence of an idea, but allowing your partner to adapt that idea for the region. And that's a trick of being willing to cede some control, but give all your intellectual know-how and be prepared. I always say to Greg, one of the most fun 3 days I ever had in my career was when we went to London and hung with Ricky and Steven.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
Are they as funny in person?
They're very, very funny. Very funny,
really,
both of them.
Both of them. And together it's a double act.
Yeah.
And they were kind of performing for us the whole time.
Yeah,
So.
and they were super famous in, walking down the street. They could barely walk down the street because the show had aired, and it was a huge hit there too.
Yeah.
So that was kind of exciting.
But they basically said, here's all the things we did, and please, Greg, do what you've got to do. And then Greg and I would spend hours talking about, is it Slough in England? Where is that in America?
Yeah. Yeah.
Things like that.
I always thought of it like these guys had invented this terrific toy, and then they played with it 3 or 4 times, and then they didn't want to play with it anymore. And I was sitting there going, I want to play with that toy. And I thought there was a lot of fun left to be had in the
They only did
premise.
12 episodes. We did 200.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there are other practical considerations to adapting formats. We're doing, in the unscripted world, we have yet to announce, but we're doing a format from Turkey,
Oh, wow.
from Canal D, called My Partner Knows. And in that instance, it's a little more practical, I say, because those episodes are 3 hours long, or almost 3 hours long, and there are 300 episodes, and they were fringe. They weren't prime time, and so we're adapting it for prime time. So we have to take a 3-hour episode and take 200 3-hour episodes and condense and boil down what we think are the best creative moments of that show and of that format to bring to America. And there is a set piece in that. It's a relationship show. There's a set piece in that where there is a lucite box at the back of the stage. Mm-hmm. And in the Turkish format, it's a little bit of a gag. And in our format, it's going to be the centerpiece because we haven't kind of seen it before. And so there are other considerations as well. There's so many things to consider when adapting something.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this the first Turkish show to be adapted in the U.S.?
We haven't gone into production yet, but I gotta think it will be the first.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once it goes, and we've had, one of the things that's so exciting about being here is tapping into all the great stories and ideas that come from this region. I wouldn't have thought that, Venezuela was a hotbed of creativity, but we found a show called Jane the Virgin there.
Is that where it's from?
Which is from Venezuela, and the star won the Golden Globe, the star of the American version. And I think for us, creativity can be from anywhere, and good ideas can come from anywhere. You have to, though, spot the synthesis of where do you see its application into your market. In the same way that people come to license you ideas and sell ideas into your production companies and your television networks, you have to respond to that idea viscerally and go, oh, wait, I see what works in my culture around this idea, but a lot of the other stuff doesn't work around this idea for me. Like we aren't as mean as that, or we are more hopeful, or we don't want there to be losers, or whatever the elements are that you need to bring from your own culture to it. So the most important thing is to work with people who are willing to go on that journey with you and respect what you know about your culture and localization, but you in turn love what they did originally so that you buy into the vision.
And maintain the essence of it.
Exactly.
It's what you take when you're adapting it.
Exactly.
See, the challenge with reality shows, for example, here, reality shows, you watch a show at home on your television, and you get to see like very vulnerable moments of people, real people, moments of humility. And so in a culture where people are a little more reserved about that, and maybe find it offensive to share certain moments like that, if you were going to, produce or create a reality show in a culture like this, what would you do to make it work and still be entertaining, and not something where it's more like a lecture, or something where it's a little more on the educational side rather than something that's entertaining and gripping with that conflict in mind?
I mean, one thing you can do, and which we always try to do, are enhance format elements or figure out natural ways to produce conflict and drama. One thing you could do is add an element. You could add a character, or you could add a element which would be, the moment in Wife Swap that works, for example, isn't necessarily the key element isn't necessarily seeing the mother freak out on the husband and the family. and her new family that she's with. It could be the cutaway and the fact that this mother is so different from the other mother. And the fact that in reality, there are all different kinds of narratives that I love to play with, that I love to that I think has driven a lot of scripted, frankly, over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think that we would look for, instead of focusing on people and their lowest common denominator and their base emotion and energy, we would look for format devices that highlight perhaps more nuanced conflict and don't have to drag out things that wouldn't appeal to this culture.
And I think aspirational is something I feel throughout the region. There's real aspiration and desire, to kind of improve and grow and move through the modern age while preserving identity, and finding those ideas that help amplify that aspiration and give direction and momentum to that idea is really exciting, because everybody we have met on this trip has been so positive and so looking for more of that and wanting to learn or wanting to grow or wanting to pitch their idea or wanting to share their concepts, and finding a way to amplify that aspirational element that maybe doesn't exist in a format coming from another market, but could have that layered onto it, and that kind of thinking is called partnership. So it can't be dictated from one to the other and or told back. It needs to be nuanced and worked through and really partner led. I mean, that's the essence of successful format licensing and production.
Would you say, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just from a very practical standpoint, I think that the size of the frame can change, and a lens can take something small and make it bigger. And so when people are more reserved, if you go in for a close-up, you can still get the drama that's on their face, and people who are louder, you have to pull back and let them scream at each other. But as long as people feel the same, emotions, the camera can find them.
So you just magnify them.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know if you're saying that they're bigger, but for example, just to go back to The Office, when we started. The shows that were on NBC were much bigger and louder, and Will and Grace.
Fear factor also.
And they wanted to promote it a certain way where they just kind of hit the highlights really quick and loud, loud, loud. And they tried to cut promos like that from The Office, which is a very subtle, quiet show, and it didn't make any sense. And that show needed to have long promos with no cuts in them, so you could build, understand the situation, and then those little looks would make be meaningful. So it's possible that in a more reserved culture you just have to shoot it differently, but you can.
And Greg really invented that with The Office. As we watched every commercial and every other show after it imitate us, and those looks and feels. But Greg collaborated and brought in a director who was also a cameraman and actually came from reality television.
That's perfect.
And so talk about collaboration, taking an idea, then building your own team that can build off of that.